Okay, so in the first few videos, we focused on individual constructs, like we focused on tables, we focused on forms, we focused on queries and reports. Now I kind of want to build on that, and it's not that we're going to look at any new constructs this time, so much as combining it into a more complex functionality. Like we looked at how to create basically a ticket tracker. Now with a ticket tracker, you're adding new tickets. So you're adding new rows. What I want to look at is inventory tracking now, because in inventory, you're not necessarily adding a new row, you're modifying a pre-existing row, and you're making decisions based on the values in those rows. Like for instance, if you have a form that lets a customer purchase something, well, if the object they're looking for is 0, they really shouldn't have a purchase button. That purchase button should become disabled, or the functionality changes. It becomes like a reserve button. Okay, so you're talking about making decisions based on values now, and we really haven't done that. So again, quick summary, we're looking at modifying rows as opposed to adding rows, and we're looking at making decisions based on the values in those rows. So let's first start by creating a table. Now, I'm going to manually create the table, and I'm going to manually populate the table. Yes, you could create a form that lets you add new inventory objects, but I'm going to skip that right now because we've already kind of looked at that. We've already looked at adding new rows to a table, and inventory is really no different. We really just want to focus on making the decisions based on the values in that table. So let's go to Create, Table. I'm going to click here and choose Design View. We have to name it. So let's call it Inventory _ TBL, so we keep the naming convention consistent. All right, let's get rid of the primary key. And this will be a short text, and the name will be product _ description. Or it could be product name. And again, you want to be careful about using words that are protected, that they're used within the structure of the database itself. Like you don't want to ever have the field name be name. You don't want the field name to be number. You got to be careful not to use protected words. Not to mention that, particularly in larger database, those names aren't very useful because one table may have a customer name or a client name. Another table may have employee name. Another table may have product name. So you really using name isn't a good idea, and those are the two reasons. One, it may be protected and used within the structure of the database itself. Two, it really doesn't give the users, the people who are utilizing those tables, particularly if they're doing queries and so forth, they really kind of have to chase what that value is. So you want it to be much more descriptive. So product description is a short text. Product quantity, and we'll make this a number. Now sometimes a field will have a number, but it's not formatted as a number, such as a phone number or a social security number, or maybe you have some kind of other numerical identifier, but since you don't manipulate it like a number, you don't store it as a number. In this case, we are going to manipulate this, so it's important that it's a number. Okay, so let's go back to View. You must first save the table, yes. And we had already given it a name, so it just saved the updates to it. And again, we're not going to create a form that adds new values. We've really already seen that, just as you added new, when you're adding new, for the ticket tracker, you have a form that creates a new ticket. So it's really be no different. You'd create a new product. So we're not really looking at adding new rows in this, at this table. We will initially, so we can do the other functionality. So we're not really looking at making a form for adding new rows. We want to use forms that make decisions based on the rows. Like does the person have access to a purchase button or a reorder button or a reserve button based on this value, that kind of thing. So, product description, red herb, we got 20. Green herb. And it's perfectly okay to use spaces in the value itself. That's fine. You just don't want spaces in the name. Green herb, we'll say we have 0. First aid spray, we'll have 10. Now, if you add a row and you add a value to a row or to a field, that you don't have to save. As soon as you make that change, it's there. The only thing that you have to change is, like, for instance, save rather, is like I changed the size, so it's going to say, do you want to save it? So it's just important to note that once you add that value, it's yours to keep. You can change it again, but that change is instant. The only way you can get away with that, okay? Say I put in a 1 here and I say, oh, that's wrong. I can hit escape. But if I put a 1 in here, come down here and hit escape, not so much. That value is already saved. Okay, so far, so good. So like I said, it is going to prompt me to save because I changed the size of the columns. Now we want to start making decisions based on the values in that table. So let's go ahead and create a form that's going to interact with that table. So let's go to Create, Blank Form, View, Design View. Let's make the changes by clicking on Design. Let's make the changes that I like to make at the beginning. Property Sheet, Format. So navigation buttons, no. Record selector, no. And sizable, make that thin. Now, again, record selector navigation button, that's very important because you're controlling how they're interacting with not just the form, but the underlying table. If you let them have a record selector and navigation buttons, that may allow them access to records that you don't want them to have access to. So it's not just a matter of preference. It might be vital for data security. So let's now start put some controls here. So let's go to, actually let's link the table first. So let's go to Form, go to Data, go to Inventory Table, and now this form is linked to that table by doing that, just like we did before. So let's go ahead and add some controls. Let's click on the control, the combo box, drag and drop it here. And we've seen this before. There's 3 choices because it's linked. If I hadn't linked the table, you'd only have 2 choices. So find a record on my form based on the value I select in my combo box. Next, product description. Next, widen this out, because if you don't widen this out, no matter how wide you make this box, it uses the formatting of here. So if this clips it, it'll still get clipped no matter how wide you make that box. So give yourself a little extra room here. Next, product description, finish, and there you go. So let's take this and move this up here. Now, it's important to note, this is just a label. This top box is a label, so it's perfectly okay to put spaces in here. This is where you have, if you notice, product underscore description. So we haven't changed the name of the field, we just changed the label. So it's perfectly okay to make modifications to the label. You just don't want to change the field name itself. So now the next thing we want to do is we want to have a box down here that has the value for the corresponding object. So you're going to choose the product, and then you want the product quantity here. So that's really easy. We come to edit, add existing fields, drag and drop product quantity. Again, get rid of the underscore if you want to make it a little more user-friendly. Again, just from the label. You're not changing the name of the field itself. And you can make this a little bit wider. Click on Save, and we'll call this inventory underscore control. Now we're going to cheat a little bit when I make this because I want to show you different functionality. So we're not going to go through like a whole purchase database. Like we're not going through purchase functionality and stuff like that. But I do want to show you how to enable and disable a button based on quantity. So I'll probably put a button here that says purchase. I just want to give you a heads up. It's not going to be like a full purchase functionality. I just want to show you how you can disable a button based on that. I also want to show you how you lock down this field so it can't be manually changed. So let's do that first. Let's click on that. Let's go to Property Sheet. For data, see how it says enabled? Change that to no. So watch what happens. These values are going to change. By the way, I did a split in the middle of this video. I had to check something. So I believe I changed it for inventory for green herb to 11. So red herb, 20. Green herb, 11. First aid spray, 10. So perfect. So this is what you want, because like if you think of like Amazon or some online website, you can't manually come in here. Sometimes they won't even tell you. Sometimes they will. Sometimes you'll see 20 left in stock, 5 left in stock. So sometimes this number is client-facing, customer-facing. That's why I want to put it here. But maybe you're an inventory manager and you want to know how many there are. Well, you don't want to manually change this either. You want to know how many are there, and then maybe you're going to have an option to add some because a delivery was received, or you just requisitioned some, someone needed some, and you just handed someone out and you want to minus it. So I think we're going to stop here for this first video. I want you to be able to kind of soak this in. And so this gives you the very basic because, again, this is different than what we've been doing before. Up to this point, we've been adding new records. We're not adding new records. We're going to modify a record and make a decision based on that record. So we've got the table, we've got the form. The next one, we can do the transition into the actual coding. So that should do it for this one.